Hello, welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack. Tonight, we are going to look at some more numbers from the Utah Jazz and the season they're having thus far. And we're also going to talk a bit about Lauri Markkanen and where things stand. Is he going to make his second All-Star game? So let's talk about it.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
Lauri is having another fantastic season. We rarely actually talk about Lauri anymore just because he's been so consistent. He's been fairly consistent throughout his time with the Jazz. He's played terrific basketball for the most part. Last year he was down a bit, but for the most part with the Utah Jazz, he's played terrific basketball. And I certainly think that Lauri is deserving of another All-Star game nod. His scoring numbers are off the charts. They're terrific. His field goal percentage numbers continue to be good. His three-point percentage numbers are pretty good. You know, he had slightly better numbers in his All-Star season, that first season with the Utah Jazz in some areas, but the overall scoring was a little bit below where it is now. So I think there's a definitive, case for Lauri to get another All-Star game nod. Now, I don't really think that means a lot in the grand scheme of things, whether Lauri makes or doesn't make but I think it's good for Lauri. I think it's good for Lauri, and I think he deserves the recognition that he is having another stellar season. The Jazz aren't particularly good. We know that, but Lauri's play has been good, and his plus and minus, even though the Jazz are really struggling in the plus minus as a team, Lauri's plus minus is almost even, which is a good indication of how good he's been on this team, considering that he is hovering right around the even point in that plus minus.
So let me say this. It's great to be back. We haven't been on, or at least I haven't been on for 2 weeks. And, talking about my favorite thing, the Utah Jazz, there's nothing better. So glad to be back. Sorry we've missed some time for some other commitments. But I agree with you with Lauri. I watched before the All-Star starters were named today, a few weeks ago, I read an article on ESPN that didn't put Lauri in there and didn't even put him in as, deserving but missing the cut. So that made me a little bit worried. But I also will say this, is that these are reporters, right? And at the end of the day, what I figured out is a lot of these people that have big names, they're just reporters. They're not basketball people, they're reporters. So, I do think that when coaches get involved and start to highlight and make selections, which does happen for the reserves, I think that there's more parity with it. Having said that, I think we have to be fair, positive and negative with Lauri. His numbers, scoring is up this year. That's great. His rebounding is down from his best season. His three-point field goal percentage, I believe, is at 36.5%. And for a forward, that's actually above average, because for forwards, it's slightly below 36% for small forwards and power forwards. So that is above average, but it's not shockingly good, right? It's not the 40% you would think Lauri would be. And then I think on a fairness standpoint, defensively, Lauri has not been good this year. His stats are not good. And so I do think we as fans focus only on offensive numbers, and I think we have to look at the defensive numbers, particularly for the Jazz, and they have not been good. So I do think that that's a knock on Lauri. Do I want him to make the All-Star team? Absolutely, I do. I like Lauri a lot. I'm really proud he's on our team. I think he's had a great year, but I also want to be fair in balancing these things, right? Like, you're very critical of Zach LaVine, the players that play no defense, and you should be, and they made the All-Star team and probably shouldn't have because they played zero defense. And so I do think that's one thing that we should criticize Lauri for.
I do think that, I do think that if you go down the entire roster of all the Jazz players, every single person on the roster can play better defense. And I think that Lauri's numbers are being brought down by some of the other players around him on defense, and quite frankly, also by his head coach, who has not yet shown the ability to coach defense whatsoever in through 3.5 seasons. That being said, I think that those offensive numbers are so good, and considering that if you do look at the plus minus, really Lauri on this team is the only one that's really relevant in plus minus. Everybody else is very negative, including Keontae. So Lauri is certainly much better there, and it shows his importance on the court to the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are a much better team when he plays versus when he doesn't. I mean, if Lauri to play all these games, the Jazz are going to be borderline whether or not they miss that OKC, whether their draft pick flips over to OKC. And that's one of the reasons why Lauri is obviously missing games, because he makes that big of a difference on this Utah Jazz team. And I think that says a lot for his value as a basketball player. And we'll see if the Jazz move him or not. I don't know if they are. I don't think anybody knows for sure if the Jazz are looking, if they receive a great offer, they're going to move him. I do feel that is absolutely the case, because I think that applies to pretty much everybody on the Jazz roster other than probably Ace Bailey. But we'll see.
I agree. I think your point of, and maybe while I'm making this statement, you can look up defensive rating by team and we can see it, because it is shocking. The Jazz are the worst, and there's a big gap. It is shocking. And I heard this, I think it was Sean Elliott today watching the game, where he made the comment that the Jazz right now, or somebody made the comment, I'm giving it to Sean Elliott, the Jazz right now are the worst in the history of the NBA in their defensive rating. I take some of this with a grain of salt, because we've heard of so many statements that are just dead wrong, but it is bad if you look at that. And so I do think Lauri is impacted by that. It's probably not fair, given that he is second, and this is a shocking number too. He's second in minutes per game on the Utah Jazz. And last year, he was second in minutes per game on the Utah Jazz, which is just dumbfounding, because he's by far your best player. And of course, it was Keontae that had the most minutes per game, both last year and this year, even though he is benched. But do you have those numbers? Because
I don't have that pulled up. I mean, okay. I have a whole bunch of tabs, but I don't have that pulled up.
Okay, so I will look at it then, but I do think it's unfair that Lauri I do think Lauri tries on defense. He's not a stellar defensive player, but his numbers are not stellar, but that's probably in part because of the poor Jazz defense overall.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I wanted to mention tonight in this podcast is one of the other things I want to talk about. The Jazz have got the Jazz are scoring a lot of points. That is clearly the case, and the numbers support that. They're one of the higher teams in the league in both assists and points scored, but their field goal percentage numbers are not that good. In all honesty, they are in the lower third approximately in both 3-point percentage and field goal percentage. Now, what the savior is for the Jazz is they're fifth in the league in number of free throw attempts shot per game. And that goes a lot to how many free throw attempts Keontae is getting, and also Lauri is getting a lot of free throw attempts. They're both around 7 free throw attempts per game. So that's very good. And obviously Keontae has learned to kind of flop on the offensive end and get to the line. I don't think that's the case with Lauri. He's not really much of a flopper, but he presents such a problem at that 7'1" height, with his ability to shoot the ball, that he ends up, and he's not, credit to Lauri, he's not afraid of contact. When he gets in the paint, he's not afraid of it. He doesn't shy away from it. So he's going to get to the line, and he's one of those guys that should get to the line because he's legitimate getting fouled. I mean, I think we all want the flopping to kind of come to an end, because it it breaks up the game. It's not good for the game of basketball. It makes it more difficult to watch. But Lauri's fouls, for the most part, are pretty legit. And I commend him for taking it strong to the basket and getting the free throw line, because that's kind of been the saving grace for the Utah Jazz this season, is all those free throw attempts. I mean, everybody talks about OKC and Shea, and they should, because the number of free throws he shoots is ridiculous. But OKC is like 16th in the NBA in free throw attempts per game, whereas the Jazz are 5th. So that just kind of goes to show you how many free throw attempts this Utah Jazz team is generating per game, which has kind of been a savior. And I want to look at the differential between the field goal percentage and three-point percentage coming up.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. I agree with you that. And when you watch Lauri on Chicago and on Cleveland, did you have any idea that he was as tough a player as he is? Like, I had no idea. Like I was shocked when he came to the Jazz and how strong he is, how hard he goes to the basket, how much abuse he takes in contact. I mean, he goes for it, and he is not the typical soft European player in any respect. And I completely agree with you with that. And I'll also say this: the one, to me, the biggest benefit, the biggest attribute of Keontae this year is getting to the free throw line. I will give him credit for that. He's exceptional at that. Now, do I think the rules need to change? Absolutely. There's way, way too much ridiculous fouls and going, but he is playing the rules and he is doing exceptional at that. To me, that's where he stood out this year. He shoots 37% from the three-point line. That's average, right? So he's improved scoring. He's 45% from the field. It's really the free throw shoots. But let me give you the defensive numbers before we go off of it. So the Jazz defensive rating, and this is StatMuse, so it depends on the site you look at, 123.5. The Wizards are next, 121.7. 1.8 points better. The Pelicans, 120.6. Okay, something's wrong with my numbers. And then I got some mix from prior years because the Jazz are coming up again. But those are the three worst in 2025, according to StatMuse, the site. But the Jazz are by far the worst. It's not even close. They are by far the worst. And so anybody that's playing on the starting lineup is going to look bad because of that, and is getting heavy minutes.
Yeah, so let's take a look at these field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage differentials, and that just means that what we're doing is we're taking the Jazz field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage, their average for the season, and comparing that to their opponent. And so right now, the Jazz field goal percentage is a negative 2.7. So that means they are shooting 2.7, a negative 2.7 on field goal percentage. They're shooting 2.7% worse in field goal percentage compared to the teams they're playing on average throughout the season. And 2.7% in field goal percentage, that's a lot. I mean, that sounds like a small number for, if you're really not considering it, giving it a lot of thought, but 2.7%, that's on average a negative. That's a substantial difference. So if we look at also the 3-point percentage, the Jazz are a negative 2.8% in 3-point percentage. And we know how much the Jazz have struggled to guard the three. Constant open threes. I mean, it's not just one game, it's not just 2 games, it's not 5 games. It's just a never-ending battle watching opposing teams shoot wide open threes, especially on the wings. And that is very bothersome because we all know that those 2 wing threes, those are the easiest threes to make. Those are the threes with the highest percentages in the league, and it's imperative that they guard those shots. And the Jazz have very much struggled yet again this season to guard the 3-point line, especially on the wings. So it's a problem. And there's no real easy answer to this in terms of how does it get better. I mean, we're 3.5 seasons into this, and it's not improving, and that's the worrisome part about this. And like I said, I think it's a combination of the two things, both coaching and players. And I don't know if there's a solution to this from the coaching standpoint. I don't think you can be a really good defensive team unless you have a coach that knows how to coach defense. And I believe that regardless of how good your defensive players are. Yes, I think that the team can improve defensively, but unless you have a coach that knows how to coach defense, that understands it, I think it's very difficult to get better in that area.
Well, let me say a few things on this. One, your field goal percentage overall is going to be lower if you shoot more three-pointers than the opposing team, because three-pointer gives you an effective field goal percentage that may be higher, but as a net, it's lower. So I do think we have to look at how many three-point shots the Jazz do relative to other teams. Now, having said that, everybody's shooting mostly three-pointers now, so I don't think there's a big differential there, but that could be one explanation. Secondly, I am really surprised that some of the better Jazz three-point shooters are not shooting well this year. Bryce Sensabaugh, below 35%. Kyle Filipowski, who I think is a good three-point shooter, although hasn't demonstrated low 30s. Keontae is having his best year from the three-point line, and he's at about 37.1, up from 36, because he had a few good games. But 36, 37, about league average. Lauri, 36.5%. Nurk, it's not even worth looking at. Cody's getting all this praise by Locke and others, all of a sudden, because he's moved the last 10 games, I think he's shooting low 30s. But, that's still, even if that's your league, your average for the year, that's not something you should be shooting three-point shots. So for some reason, whoever the player is, except for Lauri and Keontae, the three-point shot is not good. And they got decent shooters, I believe, on the Jazz. So what do you make of that? Like, I was kind of thinking about that the last few weeks, and I'm like, I'm honestly, I'm kind of baffled by it, because the one thing I like the last 3 games is the Jazz have been playing their youth. And honestly, I would rather them take their lumps and see what we have, right? And try to develop them. A big part of this season, they weren't playing. They were playing very sporadic minutes. And that's my theory of why they struggled, because they don't know when they're going to be in and when they're going to be out. There's no rhythm, and that's been a Hardy trademark for the 3 years, is just no rhythm. And the one thing with Quinn Snyder, and you and I are not big Quinn Snyder fans, the one thing with Quinn Snyder is he gave players consistent minutes so they got in a rhythm. And so, that's my hypothesis, is part of the poor three-point shooting is just the inconsistency in how the players play.
Yeah, the lineups, obviously the Jazz have so many young guys that they need to develop, but they can't play all those guys at the same time. It would be very difficult to play all those guys at the same time. So the lineups have been very disjointed, meaning one player will get a chance, he'll play some games, and then he'll kind of be yanked again and get very little time, and he inserts somebody else into the line. So yeah, the rhythm angle of this, I certainly would. Shooting is largely about rhythm. It's very difficult, and that's why these bench players that play like 12 minutes a game and they can be effective in 12 minutes a game, that's why they're so valuable, because only playing 12 minutes a game for most players, it's very difficult to get in a rhythm and be able to fill that role and shoot like high percentages. So it's difficult, especially on the young guys. I mean, they haven't been around the block yet, so they don't know how to carve out that type of niche where they are able to be productive in these sporadic minutes and everything. They're really struggling with it. And so I think that's certainly impacting these percentages and why they are so negative in these percentages to this point. one of the poorest in the team in one of the poorest in the league in these negative, both 3-point and field goal percentages.
But you made this point there. What Quinn Snyder's theory was, is that if a player's playing 12 minutes a game, he would give that player 12 consistent minutes at the same time every game, so they got in a rhythm. And Hardy doesn't do that. And I do think that's hard on young players. I agree with you. Playing 12 minutes a game is hard for a lot of players to get in a rhythm. But if you know you're going to get 12 minutes and you know when it's going to come, I do think there's an ability to get in a rhythm. And I think Quinn Snyder was much better at that than Hardy is. You and I both think Sensabaugh is like a knockdown shooter, right? A great basketball shooter. Yet he's not shooting well this year. Now, I think the reason is because there's just no consistency, in his play. And more than probably anyone, he is one of those guys where he'll get big minutes and then he'll get DNPs 5 games in a row. Like he's always in Hardy's doghouse, and I think it's made it very difficult for him to perform. And I think that's bringing down our 3-point percentage. At least that's my theory.
Well, yeah, Bryce has had very inconsistent minutes. And I don't know why he didn't play today. Did they announce it? Did you see anything announced? I also watched the San Antonio feed. So
he was sick.
He's sick? Okay. Well,
sick.
So it's been disjointed, it's inconsistent, and that has certainly hurt all the guys. But again, I don't know if I fault the Jazz so much in this because they can't play all the guys. I think it's better probably to play them significant minutes for a stretch of games rather than playing each one of them like 7 or 8 minutes. So you kind of move some guys into the lineup, move some guys out. The Jazz have to make decisions on players this year. They can't just continue to add guys to the roster and carry all of them forward. They have to start making decisions on players and who do they go with, who do they step away from. That's part of this season, and that's a big part of this season. That's just not a minor detail. This is a major part of the evaluation process of this season.
Yeah, I agree. You're going to have to write some contracts, and honestly, if you're not going to give them the contract, see if you can get some value in a trade. But you need to make some decisions on players. The fourth-year players you need to make decisions on. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But clearly, your basic point of the percentages being at a deficit, that's not good, right? And when you're a deficit in percentages, you're at a deficit in turnovers. You're a deficit in, defense. It's not even close. We're always we're so far the worst. It's just not good. And there's another team now that's struggling, the New York Knicks. No defense, right? Mike Brown. They took away a coach that honestly offensively is really challenged to put in Mike Brown. And now they're getting clubbed. They got clubbed today in New York. They're not playing good basketball, and I suspect, without looking at it, it's defensive rating. They're just not playing defense, even though they paid all of that money to get 2 forwards that are really lockdown defenders. And not only that, it's they have a guard. Who's the guard? One of the Villanova guards that was on Portland is now
Hart.
Yeah, like Hart. Great defender too. So it's unexplainable other than probably bad coaching, right? On that team, that they're not a better defensive team.
Yeah, I haven't logged a lot of minutes watching the Knicks this season. Quite frankly, I'm not a huge Mike Brown fan, but I did notice. I looked at the box score today, and I noticed that Clarkson played 1 minute today, and Clarkson's numbers are not particularly good. Which we all know Jordan Clarkson is one of the poorest defensive players in the NBA, and now he's in a situation where the Knicks are struggling defensively, and quite frankly, Clarkson shouldn't be getting minutes. That's one of the guys that should be out in terms of getting playing time, and I'm sure Jordan's not happy about that, but his numbers aren't particularly good, and I was under the opinion, and I think you were under the same opinion, that Jordan's time as an NBA player were coming to a close. So I don't know why the Knicks went out and signed him personally, and I think it was a mistake. And considering where the Knicks are defensively, I think it's proven it out to be a mistake in that signing. Now, it wasn't a lot, so it doesn't really matter that much, but still, it's something.
Yeah, I actually just pulled up the Knicks. I fixed my stat news numbers. So it goes Jazz, Wizards, Pelicans, Kings, Lakers. That's a surprising one. Nuggets. That's a surprising one. Nets, Bulls, Hornets, Clippers, Pacers, Bucks, Knicks. Now, other than the Nuggets and maybe the Lakers, the characteristic of all those teams are bad. So the Knicks there, with that mix of some very bad teams, that there's your reason why that team is struggling. And with Bridges, in Hart, in Anunoby, that team should not struggle defensively. Right. I mean, there's something fundamentally wrong there that they're struggling. And honestly, with Tatum hurt, this is their year. Right? The Cavaliers, the Knicks, you gotta be like licking your chops and you gotta be out. This is the year. Right? I mean, there's no excuse this year because you want to win this year before the Celtics are restocked again.
That's the way it was supposed to be. But I mean, like I said, I didn't agree with I'm not a huge Tom Thibodeau fan, but I think that Mike Brown was a poor choice. If you want to fire Tom Thibodeau, fine, but to bring Mike Brown in as the replacement, I just disagree with that decision. I think it was a bad decision, and I think they're paying for it now.
Yeah. And do you think it's hard to get a coach in New York City? I mean, come on. I mean, there's not a better place to coach. I mean, a lot of stress, right? But, I mean, that's an unbelievable place to coach. So you could get some amazing coaches in there to play. But I agree with you. I don't think he was a good choice, and I think they're going to pay the price because of it. Another one that's not a good choice, Doc Rivers and the Milwaukee Bucks. Yeah. Doc got lucky one time and won a championship. Everywhere else he's gone, he's failed. And that team, I watched them today. I watched them against the Hawks. They're not a bad team, right? I mean, they got Miles Turner. They got Giannis that guy's a footer, taking the whole length of the court, dunking the ball. I mean, that guy's just unreal. You know, they got some players. I mean, they got Kuzma, but they're bad, right? I mean, they're a bad team. They should be much better than they are. But I'm guessing it's just coming down to coaching. You know, wrong guy. You know and I assume he'll get moved off eventually because that's what happens to Doc Rivers.
I think there are a bunch of coaches that are kind of on the hot seat at this point. Doc Rivers certainly has to be one of those, you would think. I mean, they're going to lose Giannis altogether, and he's going to be playing elsewhere because they're playing so poorly. And quite frankly, I think Quinn Snyder should be gone in Atlanta. I think he should be canned. I'm not a fan of that guy. I wasn't a fan of watching his teams at Missouri, carried on to the Utah Jazz, and now it's in Atlanta. I think that's a really poor coaching hire. Thought it was a really poor coaching hire by Dennis Lindsey when he made it. So there's a bunch of guys who just have done in my opinion, I think coaching in the NBA right now, considering that each team has like 10 coaches, I can't believe how poor it is overall as a league. It's just wild.
Yeah, well, it's retreads, and this happens in the NFL too. You know, you get in the club and you go from one position to another. Look at Alvin Gentry. He's now, I don't think he's coaching anymore. But Alvin Gentry, how many times did he get a head coaching opportunity and never won anywhere?
Yeah.
You know, so it's how it works. But I agree with you. I mean, there's this group of really good select coaches like Eric Spoelstra, that's just an exceptional coach, right? And you hope you get one of those guys, because some of these other ones, um, it's just surprising. So I tell you, when I was watching Giannis, and then you were talking about how good Lauri is, and he is. Lauri's great. Giannis is in another category. I mean, he's literally taking the ball like a guard from getting the rebound and taking it down to the other end, and it is just incredible. And that guy is so strong and so athletic. I mean, you got that guy on your team and other good players, and you can't win. There's something wrong.
Yeah, well, they certainly should be better than they are. And you're right, that falls on Doc Rivers. He's just simply not. He's not a plus coach. That's just all there is to it. He never has been. And at this point in his life, he never will be. I like Doc Rivers, the basketball player, those old Atlanta Hawk days. I don't care for Doc Rivers, the coach, at all. Not. And
Yeah, I did too.
I didn't like him in Orlando. I didn't like him with the Clippers. I didn't like him in Boston. And I don't like him with the Milwaukee Bucks.
What happened to the coach that was coaching the Nuggets that got fired? Mike Brown.
I think that he's out of the league.
Resurfaced?
No, I think he's out of the league right now.
Because he was a good coach. There's a guy, he must wear on players. He got fired for some reason, but he's a good coach. There's a guy that if you got an opening, I would consider him. But anyhow, we've talked enough about coaches that are not the Jazz coach. Let's go back to your list of deliverables.
Well, I think that's for the most part. I think that's pretty much it for this edition. I think we talked enough about the differentials in field goal percentage and 3-point field goal percentage, and Lauri, how he should at least be in the consideration for an all-star spot, in my opinion. So, unless you have anything to add.
I do. I want to pull up something. Let me just go take a quick look at this and see if it gives me it. I wanted to pull up the NBA standings because yeah, it's here. Okay, so I won't share it, but I'm just going to go on league different. So this is the differential. Now, the best team in the league this year on record is the Oklahoma City Thunder. The last 15 games they haven't played fantastic. They crushed Cleveland today. I mean, in Cleveland. I mean, they just hammered him. But the interesting thing is Hartenstein, very important player for the Oklahoma City Thunder because they don't have good rebounding without him, right? He's been out a lot. He's missed, I think, 11 games in a row. He's been out a lot. The differential of the Oklahoma City Thunder is 13.4. The next team is the Detroit Pistons. It's 7.2. 7.4, 7.2. After that, it's San Antonio at 5.3, Denver at 4.7, and then it bounces around 5.3, 6.4, 6.7, 13.4. I mean, it is in this team. Honestly, it's flawed. I don't think Dort should be starting. I don't think on a championship level team, Dort is a starting level player. They have not had Hartenstein in. They still got the differential that's so much better than any other team. I mean, it's incredible. And they own the Clippers pick this year. And they own the Jazz pick if it's out of the 8. I mean, that is just a juggernaut, of a team. And, Chet is still developing, right? I mean, he's still developing as a player. He's not what he's going to be if he can stay healthy. I mean, I am just amazed at how much better that team is than any other team in the league.
And quite frankly, they were playing better before Jalen Williams came back. Their point differential was 16-something, then Jalen Williams came back, and they've had a difficult time inserting him back into the lineup and getting things flowing again. And I don't think he played in today's game because I heard he's injured again and he's out. And I'm not so sure right now, considering how all the struggles that team has gone through with Jalen Williams in the lineup, that actually doesn't improve the team in the near term. Now, I think that having Jalen Williams playing well helps them helps them in pursuit of another title. But the reality is that so far this year, that team has been better without Jalen Williams in the lineup than it has with Jalen Williams in the lineup. Hartenstein needs to play, though. Absolutely, 100%. That team cannot rebound without Hartenstein. They need his physical presence in the paint. They desperately need it. You can't play Chet for extended minutes at center. He's too frail.
Yeah, he's an off-the-ball defensive player. He's not on the ball, and so you need Hartenstein's toughness too. And it's interesting, is that because of their salary cap problems, they may have to move Hartenstein, and that team desperately needs that player on the team. So it'll be really interesting. One other note, and I take gaps of listening to David because like he made this comment the other day. He said, and then I turned him off for about a week. He said, well, it's going to come out. The media is going to start talking about Keontae's defensive playing, and it's very deceptive because he's been playing a lot with who did he say he was playing with? Hold on a sec. I'm blanking on players tonight. A long day. Kevin Love. Yeah. So he said, he's been playing a lot with Kevin Love, so that's hurting his defensive statistics. Now, didn't support it, didn't show any stats where he's actually been playing with Kevin Love, which he hasn't. Didn't say, well, how do you explain the last 2 years? Well, he was dreaming about playing with Kevin Love, so that affected his defensive ability. I'm like, okay, throw that out. It was just, but he made this other comment where he said, yeah, I think Denver is going to have a better record than Oklahoma City this year. I think they're a better team. And I'm like, dude, I know they fired you in Seattle. I'd be ticked off too. And I think Denver is underperformed. I like that team too, but they're not even in the same category as Oklahoma City. I'm sorry. They almost beat them in the playoffs last year, but they didn't beat them. And they're not as good a team. They're not even in the same category. So you make these ridiculous comments like that, unsupported. It just hurts your credibility entirely to say that. So I then turned him off and I've listened to him for a week and a half because I just, if you make a point, great, right? Support it. Go and get the stats. Show me, support it. Don't make these ridiculous comments that, are not supported by any sort of fact or statistical analysis. And so, that really set me off, both of those comments.
Yeah, well, if for anybody who actually watched the game today's game with San Antonio and understands basketball and actually watched Keontae play on the defensive end, this was really frustrating game watching that guy play. The lack of effort was so evident and so clear. Hardy finally, at some point in the second quarter, he called a timeout and just railed into him and started yelling at him like, yeah, you should have done that in the first quarter. I mean, the guy is just, sometimes he just puts so little effort into it that you're just like, what is this dude doing? And why doesn't Hardy put an end to it? Just put him on a bench. I mean, just force him to play hard. Just begin with that on the defensive end. Just force him to play hard. I don't ask a whole lot, but I ask for that.
Yeah, and the reality is, if you think, and we can put up some stats and show it. We can put up Bradley Beal. We can put up Levine. We can put up my guy, Colin Sexton. We can put up Trae Young. There's players up there that have tremendous offensive skill sets, tremendous, as good or better than Keontae's. If you're a zero defensive player, your value in the league right now is zero. Trae Young was given away for a bag of potato chips, not even potato chips, probably sweet potato chips. Right? I mean, now part of it is Zach Levine, you could not trade him. Bradley Beal, no one wanted him. The Clippers picked him up for like next to nothing, right? If you're a player that all you do is offensively and no defense, right now in the league, you have very, very little value. Like Colin is an example of that. Colin is an incredibly efficient offensive player. His third year in the league in Cleveland, he was good. High percentages, 3-point field goals, 24 a game. He was good offensively. Defensively, he's statistically one of the worst defensive players in the NBA. Now, he's not the worst, because we have on the Jazz the worst defensive statistical player in the NBA for the last 3 seasons, but he's not good. Those players don't have a lot of value right now. And you may say, look, great offensively, great, right? Not taking anything away from that. But if you're a player that brings 0 on the defensive end, your value in this league is very little. And we'll see. Zach LaVine, does anybody want him? Big contract, 0 defense. Bradley Beal, does anyone want him? Can score, no defense. Trae Young, we just saw what happened to him. And Trae Young, I told you this, Trae Young is one of the elite assist guys in the NBA. Elite. 3-to-1 assist turnover ratio, elite. I mean, that guy is fantastic. Plus, he can score 30 points a game. I mean, right? This guy is good offensively. No one wanted him. No one wanted that guy, right? So it is, you got to bring something on the defensive end, or you got to be Steph Curry, right? If you're so good as Steph Curry offensively, yeah, you don't have to play defense. But if you're not in that category, your value in this league is not a lot, honestly. And so, I agree with you. It's effort. It's not schemes. It's effort. I'm sure you saw it. Who was it? It wasn't a cherry pick. I think Harrison Barnes went down and dunked the ball after a made basket, because multiple Jazz players were like just lagging, right? Jogging back up the court. And so Harrison Barnes like, okay, boom, down and like layup or dunk, to somebody. And that's it's unacceptable, right? I mean, that's unacceptable. And if you're a coach, take those players and get them off the court, right? Put somebody in that's going to put some effort into it.
Yeah, it's an ongoing theme. We're 3.5 years into it, and we need to see improvement, and we just haven't. Ainge said we need to see improvement 2 years ago. We haven't seen it. So they need to evaluate it. That's part of the evaluation process. Evaluate what's happening and make some changes. So we'll see what happens. But I think we're going to call it. I think we're going to call it a night. We're already been on for 42 minutes, so we're going to call this the end to this edition of Jazz Smack, and we will see everybody next time.